I opened the front door quietly, like I always did when I came home early. The roses in my hand were fresh, still damp from the florist's spray. 50 years of marriage. Half a century. Who even makes it that far anymore? I thought I was the luckiest man alive. That thought died the moment I stepped into the kitchen. She didn't see me. Her back was turned, and she was on the phone. I wasn't eavesdropping at first, not really. But I heard my name. Then I heard the name Daniel. Daniel. My brother. I froze. Her voice dropped to a whisper, the kind she used when she thought no one was listening. He's old, Daniel. He doesn't even touch me anymore. He's barely present. I'm with him because I have to be. But I want you. I've always wanted you. The world slowed. My chest went tight. The flowers fell from my hand and hit the tile with a soft, traitorous slap. She turned fast, too fast. Her mouth opened in a silent gasp when she saw me. "James," she said, her voice breaking like glass. My body moved before my mind caught up. I walked straight to her, looked her dead in the eyes. 50 years. 50 years I gave her. We met in college. I gave up a scholarship to stay with her when her father got sick. I worked double shifts when the kids were little. I carried her through breast cancer, held her hand through grief, through childbirth, through her mother's death. And now she tells my brother I don't touch her? That she's always wanted him? I didn't speak. I just walked past her, into our bedroom. Her footsteps followed me, rapid, desperate. "James, please, listen, it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" I turned on her. My voice echoed. "You told my brother you want him. You told him I'm just a burden. So no, it's exactly what I think." She started crying. Of course she did. But I felt nothing. Not sadness, not anger, not even hate. I felt the kind of emptiness that screams louder than any rage. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. "How long?" I asked quietly. Silence. "How long, Maria?" She sniffled. "Almost 30 years." The number struck me like a bullet. 30 years. That meant, since before our youngest was born. I stood up and walked out of the room. I don't remember grabbing the car keys, but I was in the garage, engine running, before I even realized what I was doing. I drove with no destination. Just miles of asphalt under my wheels and a gaping void in my chest. I parked by the beach. The sun was setting. I sat there, letting the sound of the waves try to convince me the world still made sense. I reached into the glove compartment for napkins to wipe my face and found something instead. A notebook. Leather-bound. Her handwriting. I had never seen it before. It was her diary. I didn't mean to read it. But I did. The first entry I opened to wasn't even old. March 11th, I saw Daniel today. He told me he was tired of hiding. He wants me to finally leave James. He says I owe him that much. I told him I would. But I won't. Not yet. Not while James is still useful. Still useful. Useful. That word burned. That one word undid every memory, every moment, every sacrifice. I wanted to scream, to throw the notebook into the ocean, but I kept reading. April 4th, I slept with Daniel again. We met at the house by the lake. I told James the first was going to see Margaret. He believed me, like always. He always believes me. God, he's so predictable. Predictable. Like I was a fool. A puppet. She laughed at me in ink, mocked me in private while smiling in public. The waves kept crashing. The tide pulled in and out like time mocking me. I read pages until it was dark and I couldn't see the words anymore. But they were already engraved in me. I couldn't read them. I couldn't know. I drove home around midnight. The lights were off. She was asleep in our bed. I stood there, watching her breathe peacefully. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I turned, walked into my office, and locked the door. Because that was the night I decided, if she could lie for 30 years, then I could plan for 30 days. Let the game begin. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling for hours, playing every word from the diary over and over in my head like a broken recording. It didn't even feel real. Not the betrayal. Not the lies. Not the fact that the woman I had built my entire life with had secretly hated me while smiling across the dinner table. At some point during the night, something inside me hardened. Not in anger. Not in hatred. But in purpose. I was done being the fool. I was done pretending my life was still what it used to be. I had spent 50 years being a husband. Now, I was going to be something else entirely. By the time the sun rose, I had a plan. Or at least the beginning of one. Maria came into the kitchen like nothing happened. She wore her usual morning robe, tied too loosely at the waist, her hair lazily pinned back. I wondered if she had worn that same robe for him. If she had walked into his kitchen in the same way. I didn't speak. She didn't either. She just poured coffee into 2 mugs like every other morning. Set one down in front of me. I didn't touch it. She sat across from me and finally spoke. "James, I know you read it." I stared at her. "All of it?" "No." "Enough?" "Yes." She swallowed hard. It's not what you think." "Don't," I said. "Don't insult me further." We sat in silence. Her eyes were glossy, red-rimmed. But not once did I see remorse. Just discomfort. Just regret at being caught. "You have to understand," she started. "No," I said flatly. "I don't have to understand anything. You lied to me for 3 decades. You used me for status, for security. You let me raise a child who isn't even mine." Her eyes widened. She wasn't expecting that. I leaned in slightly, my voice lowering. "That's right. I know." She covered her mouth, like that would keep the truth from leaking any further. "I read enough to know who you are now. And I read enough to know that the woman I married died a long time ago." She started crying again, quietly, almost pitifully. But I felt nothing. The man who would have tried to comfort her was already dead. I stood up. "I'll be staying in my study from now on. Don't come in. Don't talk to me unless it's absolutely necessary. And for God's sake, don't pretend this marriage still exists." She said nothing. Just sat there with her shoulders shaking. I didn't look back as I left the kitchen. For the next 3 days, I became a ghost in my own home. I moved silently, avoided eye contact, barely spoke. I researched. I combed through the diary in full. Every page. Every word. Every betrayal. I catalogued the dates, the places, the people she mentioned. I made notes. I took screenshots of text messages she had forgotten to delete from her laptop, which I accessed easily. Her passwords were predictable. She was predictable. I even found emails, long threads between her and Daniel, talking about me like I was nothing more than a worn-out accessory in her life. She called me the antique. He called me the old fool. One email made me pause. "You keep promising to leave him," he wrote. You've been saying that for years. Her reply, I'll leave when it benefits me. Not a second before. Beneath all the rage, a cold calculation was taking shape. She wasn't just a woman who fell out of love. She was a strategist. She had manipulated my trust for decades, used it as leverage. And she was smart. Smart enough to keep her mask on even when the rot underneath had long taken over. But now I had something she didn't expect, a time. She thought I'd yell. She thought I'd scream, throw things, maybe leave. But I wasn't going anywhere. I was going to sit in the shadows and dismantle everything she built, piece by piece, with the same patience she used to build her secret life. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, discreetly. An old friend. Trusted. I didn't ask for a divorce. Not yet. I asked for an updated copy of our will, our property holdings, and the prenuptial agreement we signed in 1971. He sent it all over without asking questions. She thought I was still in the dark. That's what made it so easy. By the end of the week, I had gathered enough evidence to expose her, if I wanted to. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't interested in scandal. Not the kind she was expecting. She was too prepared for confrontation. I wanted to shake the foundation of her world, slowly, methodically. And the first crack would come through someone she never expected. On Sunday, I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. Hello? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I simply said, we need to talk. In person. Tomorrow morning. The cabin. He hesitated. James, look. Tomorrow, I repeated. 8 a.m. Don't be late. Then I hung up. The next morning, I was there early. The air was still. Cold. The lake outside the cabin looked like glass. Untouched. Peaceful. I hadn't been there in years. I heard his car pull up, gravel crunching under his tires. He walked in slowly, cautious, like he expected me to have a gun. I'm not going to kill you, I said. Sit down. He Saturday. I tossed the diary onto the table. He looked at it and sighed. So, she told you? No, I said. She didn't. You both lied. She just happened to die before she could lie anymore. Daniel flinched. I leaned forward. You ruined my life, Daniel. You took my wife, my family, and my dignity. But you're not going to jail. And you're not going to be publicly humiliated. You're going to suffer the way I did, quietly, invisibly, and endlessly. He blinked. What the hell does that mean? I smiled. It means I've only just begun. Daniel didn't speak at first. He just stared at me, visibly shaken, as if seeing a version of me he'd never met before. Good. That was the point. I didn't plan for this to happen, he said after a moment, his voice small, almost pathetic. It just happened. I laughed once. Cold, short, sharp. That's your defense? That your betrayal of your own brother for 3 decades was an accident? He looked away. His hands were shaking. I loved her, he said. No, I replied. You used her. Just like she used you. And you both used me. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He knew better. He was a lawyer, he understood evidence. And I had it all. The diary, the emails, the years of secrets. He couldn't argue with a mountain of facts. I leaned forward. You going to give me everything? Access to your financial records. Your client list. Your dirty dealings, don't pretend they don't exist. I want leverage. On you. On her memory. On everyone who helped you lie to me. His eyes widened. Why? Because I'm not going to expose you. Not yet. I want control. And if I can't get justice, I'll get power. The power you both thought I'd never have again. He hesitated. And if I refuse? I stood. Then I release everything. The diary, the emails, even the photos I pulled from her cloud account. Some of them are detailed. His face turned pale. I walked to the door. You have 72 hours. I'll expect the files in my inbox. If I don't get them, I make you infamous. And then I left. Back at home, Maria was in the garden, pretending to tend her roses. A perfect scene of peace and routine, as if the last week hadn't happened. I watched her for a moment through the window. It was almost impressive, her performance. But that mask was starting to crack. When I opened the back door, she looked up and smiled, an old, familiar smile that had lost all meaning. You went out early, she said, her tone light. I had to meet someone, I replied. She waited for me to elaborate. I didn't. That evening, I reviewed the files Daniel had begun sending. It was more than I expected. Offshore accounts. Real estate in fake names. Hidden income streams. Even evidence of bribery from a case 10 years ago. I copied everything to a secure drive, encrypted, and stored the backup off-site. The next phase of my plan required subtlety. Revenge is most satisfying when the target doesn't see it coming. Over the following week, I began unraveling our life together, quietly, legally. I moved half of our liquid assets into an account under my name only. I transferred ownership of our cabin property to a trust fund set in my grandson's name. I changed the executor of our will. I restructured the holdings of my academic publications so the royalties wouldn't go to Maria if I died. She noticed something was changing but couldn't figure out what. One night, she knocked on the door of my study. James, she said softly, can we talk? I didn't answer immediately. Then I opened the door halfway. She looked tired. Genuinely tired. I know you're angry, she said. And I deserve it. But please, this silence is unbearable. I stuttered her. Unbearable like 30 years of betrayal? She flinched. I didn't plan to hurt you. But you did. And every day you continued, you made a choice to keep hurting me. She stepped closer. You're not the only one who was lonely, James. You were always working. Always in your books. I tried to reach you. No, I said. You gave up and went elsewhere. You never even told me you were unhappy. You just replaced me. She started crying again, but this time it wasn't theatrical. It was quiet. Real. I shut the door. The next day, I met with my attorney in person. I brought a printed copy of the diary. I don't want a messy divorce, I told him. Not yet. But I want full legal control over everything I've earned. She doesn't get to live off the man she destroyed. He nodded. I'll prepare the paperwork. I knew it would take weeks, maybe months. But I had time. What mattered was that she didn't see the storm coming until it was too late. Later that night, while Maria was asleep, I walked into our old bedroom. I stood at the edge of the bed, watching her sleep like I had done countless times over 50 years. But now I saw something different. I saw a stranger. A liar. A woman who could cry in the morning and kiss her lover in the evening. I opened the drawer on her side of the bed. It was where she used to keep old birthday cards, photographs, letters. I found one envelope, yellowed with age. It was addressed to her, not from me. It was from Daniel. Dated 1997. Inside, a single page. A line that hit me harder than the diary ever had. "He'll never know. You too good at pretending." I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I didn't know where the end of this path would take me. But I knew one thing now with absolute certainty. I wasn't the man she married anymore. I had buried him the moment I read her diary. I had always believed that truth was the highest form of justice. That belief had guided my entire career, decades of teaching literature, interpreting human behavior through the lens of fiction. But nothing had prepared me for the cruel reality of my own life becoming a darker novel than anything I'd ever taught. 2 weeks passed. I barely spoke to Maria. We lived like strangers under the same roof, passing each other in hallways, sharing glances so empty they may as well have been between ghosts. I watched her quietly unravel. She tried to maintain routine, cooking meals I didn't eat, leaving notes I didn't read, pretending that if she acted like everything was normal, it might eventually be true again. But the house felt colder now. Not just emotionally, physically. I turned the heat down. I wanted her to feel the chill. It was petty, yes. But it satisfied me. On the 15th morning, I received a call from the university. They were planning a retirement ceremony for me, something I'd once looked forward to. Now, the idea made my stomach turn. Standing in front of colleagues and friends, smiling, being honored while the truth of my life rotted beneath the surface? No. I wasn't in the business of pretending anymore. I declined. That same evening, as I was reviewing documents in my study, I heard Maria on the phone in the living room. Her voice was hushed, cautious. "No, I don't know what he's doing. He won't talk to me. He's not acting like himself. No, I haven't told him about the money yet." I froze. The money? She hung up soon after, but I'd heard enough. I waited until she went upstairs for the night. Then I checked the safe we kept in the basement, where we stored passports, old documents, and emergency cash. The lock combination hadn't changed in years. Inside, everything looked untouched, until I checked behind the lining. Gone. $20,000 in cash, money we'd kept aside since the early 2000s, supposedly for emergencies. She had taken it. I went back upstairs, walked past our bedroom, and into the attic. She thought I never came up here. But I remembered, long ago, we'd installed a lockbox in the ceiling panel. It was where we once kept our children's birth certificates and old love letters. I hadn't opened it in over a decade. It took me 20 minutes to find the key. Inside, I found a second phone. Burner. Hidden. Charged. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with something colder. I scrolled through the messages. They weren't just with Daniel. There were others. Names I didn't recognize. Messages with timestamps stretching back years. She had been talking to multiple men. Some of the messages were flirty. Others were explicit. Some showed photos. But one message repeated more than once, sent to different people. "He's not going to last much longer. He's starting to forget things. It'll be easier once he's gone." Gone. They thought I was dying. That my forgetfulness last winter was the onset of dementia. That I wouldn't live much longer. That message repeated with terrifying consistency. My wife had been planning her future after my death, maybe even hoping to hasten it. Was it all emotional manipulation? Or something darker? That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch with the burner phone on my chest and stared at the ceiling, wondering just how long she'd been waiting for me to die. In the morning, I made a decision. I called my doctor and scheduled a full cognitive workup. I needed a professional evaluation. Not for her. For me. I needed to know if my mind was truly slipping, or if they had simply planted the idea in my head so thoroughly that I'd started to believe it. A week later, the results came in, and no dementia. No cognitive decline. Just stress-related forgetfulness. Normal for a man in his 70s. Nothing more. I stared at the results for a long time. Then I smiled. Not because I was healthy, though that was a relief, but because I had confirmation that the game was built on a lie. I was still sharp. And now I had proof. With that, I moved to the next phase of my plan, exposure. I wrote letters. Not emails, handwritten letters to people who mattered in her life. Her oldest friend. Her sister. A pastor. Each letter was worded carefully, calmly, without rage. I explained the betrayal. The lies. The years she had spent living a double life. I included a photocopy of a selected page from the diary. Not the worst ones. Just enough to fracture the illusion. Then I mailed them. The next days were tense. Maria received a call one afternoon and answered cheerfully. That cheer faded within seconds. "What do you mean you got a letter?" she said, her voice rising. "What did he send you?" I watched her from the hallway as she stood frozen, helpless, unraveling in real time. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. That evening, she confronted me. "What did you do?" she asked. I looked up from my chair. "You mean, what did you do? For 30 years?" I just told the truth. Her eyes burned with panic. "You're ruining everything." I stood. Walked toward her. "You ruined everything. I'm just giving the world the courtesy of knowing." She tried to slap me. I caught her wrist mid-air. Her breath caught in her throat. "I'm not the man you walked all over, Maria," I said quietly. "Not anymore." I let her go and walked away. Because this was just the beginning. She didn't come out of the bedroom for 2 days. I heard her moving in there, restless footsteps, drawers opening and closing, the sound of her pacing. But she didn't cross the threshold. It was like she knew the house was no longer hers. Like she sensed it wasn't safe out here, in the open, where truth now lived and breathed. On the morning of the 3rd day, she finally emerged. She looked haggard. Her eyes were swollen, lips cracked, hair unbrushed. She held something in her hand, an envelope. She stood in the doorway of my study, clutching it like a lifeline. "I want to talk," she said, her voice hoarse. I didn't look up from the desk. "I don't." "Please," she added. I need to explain." I finally raised my eyes. "No. You need to listen." She blinked. That wasn't the script she'd prepared. "Sit down," I said. She obeyed. "You've spent decades controlling this narrative. Telling people what to think of me, what to think of us. Now, you'll listen to how I see it." I pulled open a drawer and took out the burner phone. Her eyes widened. "You thought this was hidden. Like your secrets would die with you. You thought wrong. You weren't just unfaithful. You were calculating. You were planning for a world without me in it, and I'm still very much here." "I didn't mean," she began. "Stop lying," I snapped. The words hung heavy in the air. I held up the phone. "You had conversations with 3 other men. Not just Daniel. Did you think I wouldn't find this? Did you think you were smarter than me?" She looked down, ashamed. But still, I saw no real remorse. Only fear. The fear of losing control. "I was lonely," she whispered. "Then you should have left. You had every chance. Instead, you chose to smile in my face while spitting behind my back. She opened the envelope and placed it on the desk. Inside were photographs. Old ones. Us, with the kids. Vacations. Our wedding. I've kept everything, she said. Even when I stopped loving you, I still remembered. I didn't throw it away. That stung more than I wanted to admit. Because somewhere, in some foolish corner of me, I still wanted it to mean something. But it didn't. I pushed the envelope back to her. I don't want memories of a lie. She stared at the photos for a long time, then took them and quietly left the room. I waited until the door clicked shut behind her, then picked up the phone and made a call. "David?" I said when my oldest son answered. "Can you come by tomorrow?" "Alone?" He paused. "Of course. Is everything okay?" "No," I said. "But it's time you heard the truth." He arrived the next morning, nervous. I could see it in his face. Maria hadn't told him anything, which surprised me. Maybe she thought she could still spin it her way. That wouldn't last. We sat in the garden. The sky was grey, the air thick with pending rain. "I'm going to say things that will upset you," I began. "But I need you to listen without interrupting." He nodded slowly. "I've been betrayed," I said. "Not recently. Not once. For 30 years. I explained everything, Daniel, the diary, the burner phone, the messages, the lies. I saw the color drain from his face. At one point, he stood, paced, then sat again, his fingers knotted tightly. When I told him about the possibility that one of the children wasn't mine, his hands began to tremble. "I need to know, Dad," he said. "Are you saying it's me?" "I don't know," I answered. "And I'm not going to test you. Not unless you want me to. Because in my heart, you my son. Always have been. Always will be." He covered his face with both hands. "Jesus!" I put a hand on his shoulder. "I'm telling you this because I want the truth to survive me. I won't die with this poison inside. You deserve to know who your mother really was." "She's still alive," he said bitterly. I looked him in the eyes. "Not to me." He stayed for hours. We didn't cry. We just sat silent. Grieving a woman who hadn't physically died, but spiritually had vanished long ago. Before he left, he turned to me at the door. "What are you going to do now?" I thought for a moment. "Finish what I started." That night, I cooked dinner. Not for her. For myself. Steak, potatoes, red wine. I played old jazz records and sat alone at the table, where she usually sat across from me. She came down midway through the meal and stood in the archway. "You cooking again?" she asked. I didn't answer. She moved toward the table, tentative. "James, I know I've hurt you." "Hurt?" I said calmly. "Maria, you destroyed me." She stepped closer. "What do you want from me?" I looked up. "I want you to feel what I felt. Every day. Every night. For 30 years. And the only way to do that is to take away the one thing you value most." Her face paled. "What is that?" "Control," I said. Then I stood, grabbed my wine glass, and left her alone in the silence. Because this wasn't about healing anymore. It was about dismantling. One layer at a time. It had been 37 days since I discovered the diary. 37 days of silence, calculation, and a growing resolve that something inside me was never going to come back. I wasn't interested in healing anymore. I didn't want to move on or make peace. I wanted her to feel the collapse of everything she took for granted, quietly, thoroughly, without violence, but with precision. That morning, I received a call from our bank. An unusual request had been made to transfer funds from our joint investment account into a private one, under her name only. The request was denied, flagged as suspicious. They asked if I had authorized it. I did not, I said coldly. And I want alerts on every account, every transaction from now on. When I hung up, I didn't go looking for her. I waited. She came into the study an hour later, her face pale, her voice tight. I tried to move some money for myself. It's legal. I didn't think it would be a problem. You didn't think, I said, not looking up. That's the problem. I thought we were done playing these games, she snapped. If you're going to leave me, then just do it. Don't make me crawl for every dollar I need to survive. That made me laugh, bitterly. You've been surviving quite well without me, haven't you? Buying burner phones. Booking lake houses. Paying for your little escapes with Daniel. And let's not forget that you were preparing for a future that didn't include me at all. I never wanted it to be like this. No, I said. You wanted me to die quietly. Fade away while you stepped into your new life, rich, free, and unburdened. But I'm still here. She sat down across from me, her voice shaking. So what now? We punish each other until we both collapse? Is that the plan? No, I said, my voice steady. Only you collapse. I'm already rebuilding. I saw her face twitch then, just slightly. It was the first real sign of fear I'd seen from her. And I relished it. She stood and left, slamming the door behind her. Later that day, I visited the cemetery. Not for anyone else, for myself. There was a small plot I had reserved years ago, next to my parents'. I'd always thought she would rest beside me one day. Now I wasn't so sure I even wanted my ashes to share soil with hers. I walked between the headstones, breathing in the cold air. I looked at the dates etched in stone. All those lives. All those endings. Most of them simple. Peaceful. Mine wouldn't be. I sat on a nearby bench and wrote in a notebook I now carried everywhere, a reversal of her own diary. In mine, I documented every detail of what was unfolding. Not just for me, but for my children. One day, if they needed to know, it would be there, the whole truth, unfiltered. Maria stole 30 years of truth. I'm reclaiming every inch of it, word by word. That evening, I came home to find her in the living room, drunk. It shocked me. She never drank. In 50 years of marriage, I had never once seen her intoxicated. But there she was, sitting on the floor in front of the fireplace, a half-empty bottle of red wine in her hand. I read your notebook, she slurred. I didn't react. I had left it on purpose. You want revenge? She asked, smiling without warmth. You want to destroy me, James? No, I said. I want you to understand what destruction feels like. It's not rage. It's not fire. It's watching everything you thought was permanent crumble under your own hands. She laughed, then started crying. You think I'm a monster? No, I said. I think you're weak. And I think you became a monster to survive your own emptiness. She threw the wine bottle at the wall. It shattered, staining the carpet and splattering the nearby photos. I didn't flinch. You don't get to act wounded, I said. You don't get to perform. I loved you, she screamed. Maybe not perfectly. But I did love you. You loved how I made you feel. You loved what I gave you. But not me. Never me. She covered her face with both hands and crumbled into a heap on the floor. I stood over her, unmoved. From now on, I said, you will receive a weekly allowance. No access to shared funds. No access to my study. No more fake smiles at dinner. We are not married anymore. We are just coexisting. She didn't respond. She just lay there, sobbing. The next day, I called the pastor of our church. "James," he said warmly, "we haven't seen you or Maria in a while." "There's something you should know," I said. And I told him. Not the graphic details. Just the truth, her long affair, her lies, her attempts to erase me from her life before I was even gone. There was a long silence on the other end. Then he said quietly, "Thank you for trusting me with this." I had no idea. "I know," I said. No one did. That evening, I watched from the upstairs window as Maria stepped outside to check the mailbox. She moved like a different person, older, smaller. As if she had aged 10 years in 10 days. But I felt nothing. She had buried me while I was still breathing. Now I was returning the favor. It was David who delivered the second blow. Not me. He returned to the house a week after our last talk, unannounced, tense. Maria was in the garden when he arrived, trimming dead branches with a pair of rusted shears, her motions stiff and distracted. I watched from the window as he approached her. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw her face collapse. She dropped the shears. I stepped outside and joined them just as she was whispering, "You told them?" David stood firm. They deserved to know. Maria looked at me, her eyes hollow. "You made him do this." I shook my head. "I didn't make anyone do anything. You did this. With every lie. With every choice." She turned back to David. "You told your sisters?" He nodded. Her lips quivered. "They won't understand." "They already do," he said coldly. She tried to reach for his arm, but he pulled away. "You made a joke of our family. You lied to us for decades and expected what? That we'd just forgive you once Dad was gone?" Her voice cracked. "I was alone. I was lost. I didn't want to hurt you." "But you did," he said. "You hurt all of us." He turned and left without another word. Maria stood frozen in place, the wind catching the edge of her sweater, making her look even smaller, even more fragile. I returned to my study without speaking to her. That evening, my youngest daughter, Lillian, called. Her voice trembled. "Dad," she said, "I didn't want to believe it. But I read the pages David showed us. I read her words. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I told her. "You just have to know." She paused. "Is it true that one of us might not be your child?" I didn't answer right away. "I don't know," I finally said. "And honestly, it doesn't matter. You mine. All of you. I raised you. I loved you. That's enough for me." She began to cry. Not out of fear. Out of grief. "She said you would never find out," she whispered. "She said you'd die before anything came to light." "She underestimated me," I replied. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for hours, alone with my thoughts. Not angry. Not broken. Just hollowed out. Like someone had carved me from the inside and left the shell standing. The next day, the real unraveling began. The church called. The pastor had spoken with members of the congregation who had known us for years. Word had spread quietly but thoroughly. The invitations to community events dried up. Her phone rang less. The woman who once hosted garden parties and sang in the choir was suddenly avoided, as though her presence carried contamination. Maria didn't say a word to me, but I saw it in her face. She was unraveling from the inside now, just as I had. I began packing my things, not to leave, but to prepare for the eventual move. I'd bought a small cottage on the edge of town, overlooking the hills. I didn't tell her. Not yet. That moment would come when I was ready. She cornered me in the hallway one morning, desperation clinging to her voice. "James, please. You've turned everyone against me. My friends won't answer my calls. My sister won't speak to me." "I didn't turn anyone against you," I said. "You did that the day you decided my love wasn't enough." "I made a mistake," she cried. "No," I said. "A mistake is once. You made a choice. And then you made it again. And again. For 30 years. She reached for my arm, like she always used to, but this time her touch repelled me. "You have to let me make it right," she said. "You can't," I said simply. She sank to the floor in the hallway, sobbing, her head in her hands. I stepped around her and went back to packing. That evening, I found a letter on the kitchen counter. Her handwriting. A confession of sorts. A plea. She wrote that she had been scared, insecure, that she never truly stopped loving me. That her mistakes were born of weakness, not cruelty. She begged for forgiveness, not to restore the marriage, but to be allowed to exist without shame. I folded the letter and placed it in my journal without reading the rest. Not yet. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom, shaving the last remnants of my beard. I hadn't touched it in weeks. I looked older. Harder. There was no trace of the man she once betrayed. And that was good. I didn't want to look like him anymore. I moved out on a Tuesday. I didn't tell her ahead of time. There were no long speeches, no melodramatic exchanges. I simply loaded the last of my boxes into the truck and closed the door behind me. She stood at the top of the stairs in her bathrobe, watching me. Her face was blank, as if her emotions had run dry. I didn't wait for her to speak. I didn't offer a goodbye. I got in the truck and drove off without once checking the rearview mirror. The cottage was small. Modest. 2 bedrooms, an old brick fireplace, a kitchen with worn tiles that reminded me of the house we bought after our first child was born. It didn't feel like home yet, but it didn't feel like a lie either. That was enough for now. By evening, I'd unpacked what I needed. Books. My notebooks. My father's old armchair. I made coffee and sat in silence, listening to the wind batter the windows. For the first time in over 50 years, I was completely alone. And it didn't scare me. The next morning, I began writing my final letter. It was not addressed to Maria. It was to my children. I needed them to understand everything, not just what she did, but who I was before it. I wanted them to know their father wasn't perfect, but that he had loved honestly, given everything, and been betrayed in return. I wanted them to remember the man who raised them, not the shadow he had become by the end. The letter took me days to complete. I wrote slowly, with care, sometimes rewriting entire pages. I left nothing out, no detail too painful, no sentence too honest. This wasn't a cry for sympathy. It was a testament. My truth, uninterrupted. On the 4th night, I received a message from David. It was brief, as she came to see me. "She's not well." I didn't reply. The next morning, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find her standing there. Thin. Hollow-eyed. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. "You knew better than to come here," I answered. "I just need a moment." I let her in. She walked through the living room like it was foreign terrain, taking in the walls, the fireplace, the solitude. "You left without saying anything," she said quietly. There was nothing left to say. She sat down on the edge of the sofa, folded her hands in her lap. The silence is worse than the anger, she admitted. At least when you were angry, I felt like I still mattered. You don't, I said. Her head dropped. I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I need you to understand something. I said nothing. She continued, when you got sick last winter, when you started forgetting things, Daniel told me it was time. That I should prepare for the end. But I couldn't do it. I kept delaying, kept holding on. And I realized I wasn't ready to live in a world without you. You were already living in a world without me, I said. You created it. You filled it with other men, other lies. You didn't hold on to me. You held on to what I provided. Tears filled her eyes. Maybe I did. But I still came back. I always came back. I laughed. Like a thief returning to the scene of the crime? She flinched. I stood. I'm not the man who begged for explanations. I'm not the man who waited up at night while you whispered into someone else's ear. That man died when I found your diary. She rose slowly, looking around one last time. This place, it suits you. I know. She moved toward the door, paused. I don't know what happens next. Nothing, I said. There's no next. Just distance. She opened the door but didn't step out. I'll be alone, she whispered. You already are. And then she left. I sat back down in the armchair, picked up the letter to my children, and signed my name at the bottom. 2 weeks later, I received news through a neighbor. Maria had collapsed in the grocery store. Malnutrition. Dehydration. The hospital called David. He picked her up. She's staying with him now. I didn't visit. I didn't call. But I thought about it. I wondered if she was truly unraveling or if this was another performance. I remembered the way she'd cried at the kitchen table after my mother died, only to write in her diary that she'd felt nothing but relief to be free of her visits. She had always known how to bend a moment to her favor. And I wasn't about to bend again. One morning, I burned the diary. I took it out to the back field behind the cottage, poured lighter fluid on the pages, and lit a match. I watched as the paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. I stayed until the last ember died, until nothing remained but smoke and scorched grass. I wasn't doing it for closure. I was doing it to erase the lie. My life would no longer be defined by her secret words. It was mine again. The letter had been sealed for 5 days before I decided to deliver it. I sat with it in my lap on the front porch, staring at the envelope like it might change what it contained if I gave it enough time. But truth doesn't soften. It doesn't bend or reshape itself to protect anyone's feelings. It stays sharp, even when you try to dull it. And this truth, the one I was handing to my children, needed to be felt in full. I mailed the letters on a Friday morning, one to David, one to Lillian, and one to Grace. I didn't include a return address. They knew where to find me if they needed to. If they wanted to. 2 days passed in silence. On Sunday, all 3 of them arrived at the cottage. Together. I opened the door to find David holding his letter in one hand, Lillian clutching hers like it might burn her fingers, and Grace standing slightly behind them, her expression unreadable. "Can we come in?" David asked. I stepped aside. They filed in quietly. I offered them coffee, tea, water. None of them wanted anything. They sat on the couch like strangers in their own story, and I took the armchair opposite them, bracing myself. Lillian spoke first. "You should have told us sooner." "I wasn't ready," I said. "We could have helped," Grace added. "No," I replied. I didn't need help. I needed clarity. And I had to find it alone. David leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You said in your letter that you forgave her. Do you mean that? I paused. I forgave what she was, I said. Not what she did. There's a difference. They were silent for a moment, taking that in. Grace finally looked up. Is she dying? I blinked. What? She's wasting away, she said. David said she barely eats. Lillian said she cries every night. That's not the woman we knew. No, I said. It's the woman I knew. You just meeting her now. Lillian spoke again, her voice quiet. She was our mother. Yes, I said. And she was my wife. That doesn't make her innocent. David's voice was firm. We're not asking you to forget. We're just trying to understand where we go from here. I stood and walked to the window, staring out over the hills. The sky was heavy with late autumn clouds. The trees had turned yellow and red and brittle. I spent 50 years trying to be a good man, I said. Not a perfect one. Just good. I gave her everything I had. And she spent 3 decades burying pieces of me behind my back. I turned to face them. I'm not asking you to hate her. I'm not even asking you to choose sides. I just want you to stop pretending she's something she's not. Grace wiped at her eyes. Lillian sat still, staring at the floor. David stood. Can I ask you something? Of course. If she were to die, would you go to her funeral? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? He asked. Because I loved her, I said. Even if she didn't love me back. The room went still. Heavy. Honest. Lillian finally looked up. What do we do with this now? Whatever you want, I said. The truth is yours now. You can carry it, reject it, rewrite it. But you'll never unknow it. Grace stepped forward and hugged me. She didn't say anything. Just held on. Lillian followed. Then David. We stood like that for a while, me and the children I raised, regardless of biology, regardless of betrayal. They were mine. Always had been. They left later that evening. I stayed up late, sitting by the fire, watching the embers fall into ash. I didn't feel peace exactly. But I felt something close to it. Like standing in the wreckage of a storm and realizing you're still breathing. That night, I slept deeply. For the first time in months, I didn't dream of her. 3 days later, I received a voicemail. It was Maria. Her voice was weak, gravelly. James. I wanted you to hear it from me. I saw the doctor. Stage 4 liver failure. No transplant. They are saying a few weeks. Maybe less. A pause. I'm not calling to beg. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. Click. I played it twice. Then deleted it. I sat with the silence she left behind. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel anything at all. The first snow came early that year. I watched it from the window of the cottage, a mug of coffee warming my hands, the quiet of the morning wrapping itself around the house like a soft coat. It had been years since I'd truly appreciated the way snow fell, silent, indifferent, unstoppable. Nature doesn't ask permission before it changes things. It simply moves forward. There was a time when Maria and I would have watched it together, her head resting on my shoulder, her hand curling around my arm. That memory felt like it belonged to someone else now. A man who had died without ever realizing he was being buried alive. I hadn't heard from her since the voicemail. No visits. No calls. No desperate letters begging for mercy. She had said her goodbye in a whisper, and maybe, in some small way, I respected that. It was David who called first. "She's gone," he said. "Early this morning. In her sleep." I waited for the words to land. To pierce. To cut. But they didn't. "Was anyone with her?" I asked. "Grace. She stayed the night." "I see." David paused. "We are arranging the service. No big event. Just something quiet." "I'll come," I said. He sounded surprised. "Are you sure?" "She was my wife," I said. Whether I liked it or not. The church was half full. Fewer people than I expected, more than she likely deserved. Most of them were there out of habit, not affection. A lifetime of image building doesn't dissolve overnight. Some still believed in the illusion. Others came out of pity. A few, perhaps, came for the same reason I did, not for her, but for closure. I wore a black suit that hadn't seen daylight since my mother's funeral. When I entered, people turned. Whispers began. But no one approached me. I sat in the back, alone, away from my children, who occupied the front pew. They didn't question it. They understood. The service was brief. Sterile. No eulogy. Just a few scripted readings and generic words about forgiveness and eternal rest. There were no tears. No trembling voices. Even the priest looked bored. When it ended, I remained seated as the others rose and began to file out. David glanced back at me once, but I nodded for him to go. I needed a moment. I stood slowly, walking toward the casket, which stood unopened at the front. I stared at the polished wood, imagining her inside, still, breathless, unreachable. "Hello, Maria," I said softly. No one else was in the room. Just me, the casket, and the echo of too many years. "You took everything from me. My trust. My dignity. My belief in forever. But you didn't destroy me." My voice was steady. "You couldn't. Because even after all of it, I still had one thing you never touched, my ability to love. And I gave it to you freely. You never earned it. But I gave it anyway." I placed a small piece of paper on top of the casket. A poem I had written during our first year of marriage. She used to keep it in her drawer. I found it while packing. "You forgot who I was, Maria." But I didn't. I turned and walked away. Later that night, back at the cottage, I lit a fire and sat in silence. My hands were still, no longer shaking from rage or heartbreak. I felt weightless, like someone had finally untied the ropes that had kept me anchored to a life I no longer recognized. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt free. A knock came at the door. I opened it to find Grace. "I thought you might not want to be alone tonight," she said. I stepped aside. She sat on the couch while I made tea. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. She understood that some wounds speak louder in silence. Before she left, she asked me something I hadn't expected. "Do you think she ever truly loved you?" I thought for a long time. "No," I said. "But I think she wanted to." Grace nodded. "That's enough for me." It wasn't enough for me. But I didn't say that. After she left, I returned to the fire and opened my journal. I wrote the final entry. She is gone. And yet, for the first time in years, I feel alive. Betrayal didn't kill me. It revealed me. I was never weak for loving her. She was weak for not knowing how to accept it. This is not the end. Just the final chapter of a story I didn't choose, but survived. Tomorrow, I'll begin another.